Okay, welcome back everybody. We're into the final session of our question and answer. Let me introduce you to our group here on our left, which is our Prince Andrew School students. Keris, and I've got it right now, Zach, Amy, Brooke, Hannah, and Jamie. And on our right here are election candidates, Russell, Rosie, Derek, Rob, Elizabeth, and Cruyff. So we're going to start pretty swiftly, and we're going to have a look at Jamie for our first question.
We have learned that due to an aging population, we are depending on income tax revenues from a limited percentage of the workforce. What are your ideas for increasing local revenues?
Candidate Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I know there's some proposals to increase local revenues, but again, it's very difficult in the economic climate that we face. Increased revenue is an option, but then with very little economic development, it's going to be very challenging. But I know that there's a tax working group that was established, and they will be putting some proposals forward to the new government when it is formed.
Candidate Midwinter.
Thank you for the question. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said about declining population. I do think that we need to be doing all that we can to increase our population, so we increase our tax base. But I also think we need to look at ways to minimise leakage of revenue from the island off the island. I think we need to be doing far more in terms of import substitution and growing our own food.
Candidate Yon.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Like the other two responders, I do totally agree with them. For me, I do believe that St Helena has a bleeding financial system at this moment in time. To be quite honest with you, I have done some research, and over £800,000 a year is spent on importing just bottled water. So that is a large figure. If we could keep that amount of money on the island and then introduce our own water system here, where we could be treating water for people to drink instead of having plastic bottles with water being imported, then we would be killing two birds with one stone. It will also enable money to remain on the island, and it will also then take away the bottles and the waste plastic that is going into our landfill, which at the same time is coming to the end of its age, and we will need to find more space on the island to find for a landfill. So let's look at where we can, first and foremost, save some of the money. There are other areas where we can do that, especially at the sawmill in Scotland. There's a potential there for increasing the amount of local timber that can be produced on island and sold, and that will then take down on some of the importation that we are now using. So there's quite a few avenues where we can look at increasing revenue on the island, and it will need to be across the board with whoever is elected to discuss those ways of going forward and make sure that we put them in place for the right implementation time.
Thank you. Candidate Knipe, your microphone.
Presently, I work within the tax office, and our team make it an absolute effort to try and get all the monies that are outstanding from the public, from the business sector, to uplift the cash flow of the St Helena government. That is our priority. Thank you.
Any supplementary questions? No? Can we move on to question number 2? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jamie.
What would you plan to export other than timber?
Candidate Young.
Thank you. I wouldn't say that we would need to export the timber. The timber itself could be used locally here on the island. My previous experience, and also with support from 2 previous elected members here in this House, I have supported them fully on the hemp production, which I do believe is the way forward for St Helena to bring in general revenue for this island. It has an increased value on the world market, and like make reference to earlier on, St Helena is in a well-placed location across the world where we could get possibly 3, if not 4 productions per year of hemp that would bring in millions to this island and help with our infrastructure. So that would be my main concern of increasing our exports. Thanks.
Candidate Midwinter.
So there has been an active programme going on to support increased coffee production on the island. I think there's still more that could be done in terms of increased coffee production. We've got large areas of the island that's covered in flax that's useless. We could be clearing more flax and planting more coffee. I also think that in terms of exploring other things in addition to medicinal marijuana, we could be doing things like exporting queen bees to other parts of the world. But we'd have to establish how we go about actually propagating the queen bees.
Candidate Thomas.
Just to clarify, one of the things that I think the island needs to do is try, and a lot of emphasis has been placed, and correctly so, is to try and produce more ourselves in terms of growing more vegetables and being more sustainable. One of the priorities is obviously our water source, water supply, and I can say that the previous government did allocate quite a substantial amount of money to do an investigation into our water supply, and that needs to be followed through. If we get our water source right, then obviously we can do a lot ourselves. Thank you.
Candidate Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, St Helena currently exports tuna, some coffee, and a little honey, and I think we can do a lot to develop these small initiatives because of the quality of the product. And as you know, if it is a significant quality, a small amount can command a high price. Unfortunately, Jamie, one of St Helena's biggest exports is our saints ourselves, our labour, and also one of our biggest problems. But these individuals that do go offshore contribute some £16 million annually back into St Helena's economy. So whilst immigration can work against us, it can also work for us.
Thank you. Okay. Our next question, Brooke.
How would you respond if there was a COVID-19 outbreak in the community?
Candidate Thomas.
Can you repeat the question?
How would you respond if there was a COVID-19 outbreak in the community?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. I can say that the government do have disaster plans, strategic plans in place, operational plans. So if there was to be an outbreak in the community, those plans will be triggered and actioned upon.
Candidate Buckley.
Just to follow on from that, Derek, like Councillor Thomas just said, there's a number of plans that already are in place, and there are a number of factors involved around testing and traceability, which is the barriers that we've put up. And it's all about identifying these triggers in time to be able to have effective action. And as spoken before about opening up for the island, we want to ensure that if indeed it does arrive to the island, we detect it early and we respond accordingly.
Thank you. Candidate Parker.
I think most importantly is that if people ever feel they have symptoms of COVID, is them themselves take, their own measures and, make sure inform the appropriate authorities in time, so then the plan can be actioned.
Thank you. Any supplementaries?
How would you know that the symptoms are COVID, not a simple flu or cold?
Candidate Young.
Well, thanks, Brooke. I do believe that from my experience working within the Public Health Committee and here in with legislative members, there are the right measures in place. The medical teams have been put through their task and their tests to identify COVID from a normal flu, and the measures that are at the medical team, with the medical team, I do believe are to the top of our ability that St Helena can afford to have here at this moment in time. It's rather unfortunate that, like Rosie said, we are now into the stage where we are allowing people to quarantine in their homes, and it would be great if people have those symptoms to make the initiative first and foremost, so that we would not be able to put our own staff into that risk first and be able to bring them to the hospital or elsewhere for treatment. It would be best if they could allow the right official or the right nurse to be able to enter that quarantine station and then take their samples and then bring them back to the hospital to have them checked and then notified within the required times that has already been stated in our standard operating procedures.
Brooke?
How would you keep on delivering education given the constraints of the internet connectivity?
Candidate Buckley?
Well, as you know, Brock, we're trying to change that now with the advent of this cable coming to the island. And I think it's absolutely essential in today's world that we have these digital avenues available to our kids. We have a very small population here on the island, active workforce around 2,000, which is half of the population of around 4.5. And without labor, there's very little productivity we can achieve. The way we do it is through digital innovation. So you can achieve a large amount of work with a few individuals, talented individuals, given the right equipment, the right laptops, the right connectivity, and the right innovation expertise.
Thank you. Candidate Midwinter?
I personally think we need to ensure that there is sufficient budgetary provision for ensuring that the connectivity at the education facilities is adequate for the types of study that's being undertaken, particularly as more and more study is being taken via distance learning, A-levels, and particularly types of some of the courses that are available that you just cannot bring a teacher to the island to do. So you've got to do it by distance learning. I think the provision needs to be there. It should be maintained by government, and then hopefully when the cable comes, we will have better provision, hopefully more affordable prices.
Thank you. Any further supplement? Yes, Jamie?
Say the outbreak has already happened. How would you ensure essential health services are still carried out?
Candidate Thomas?
Okay, so if there was an outbreak in the community of COVID, obviously the plans will be introduced, and there'll have to be traceability back to the individual in terms of who the individual came into contact. Those people will be isolated. There is an excellent facility here at Bradley's, and we are grateful to the Her Majesty's government for providing that funding. There is a good hospital facility out there. So the first move will be to isolate and quarantine that group of people into the hospital facility at Bradley's. So can house quite a few. And then you do traceability back to who that individual came into contact. So the plans will be evacuated. Okay.
Anything further? No, can we move on to the next question? Karis?
Over time, there has been an increase in the number of vehicles on the island. How would you tackle the car parking issues experienced in Jamestown?
Candidate Barger.
Well, I've known that Ladder Hill has been assigned, the car park just out of Rosie's has been assigned as park and ride. So I think that would be, a good way to start to address the, parking issues in town.
Candidate Thomas?
Yes, parking has been on the books for a number of years, and you're quite right in saying that the vehicles are forever increasing. There was a project that was about to be launched, and I think that needs to be followed through, paid parking. But again, it's down to funding, because obviously you need to be policed and need to be monitored. But there was the proposal to introduce paid parking and park and ride, like Rosie said, up at Laddie Hill was one location. Again, another location need to be found on the side path side. But it won't go away. Something needs to happen, and parking, paid parking is one way to go. But essential parks, you see now people coming into Jamestown, parking in Main Street, Grand Parade for the whole of the day, not leaving places for the shoppers. So it is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it's a good question.
Candidate Midwinter?
I think we also need to, as a community, look at encouraging people to be more active themselves. I think people should be looking to not necessarily take their car into town, but possibly park slightly further out of town. When I regularly come into town on a Thursday or a Friday, Market Street is just jam-packed. However, further up the street, near Pilling School, there's often spaces, but it's then people actually getting out of their vehicle and walking into town. And I think if we're more active as a community, that could help to alleviate the problem. I do agree with Park and Ride as well, or car sharing. There are other ways and means that we can address the car parking situation on the island.
Candidate Young.
Thank you. During the early stages of my term as an elected member, within the first 2 weeks, I ended up in the courthouse facing an appeal for SHG to be allowed to use the playground for a car park. It's rather unfortunate that when we try to develop St Helena, there is a lot of historical issues that comes to the fore as well. And we need to be able to manage our historical structures, infrastructure, historical issues with our development. We must learn to marry them. If we cannot do that, St Helena will not move forward in any shape or form. Today, everything changes around us. We have a great museum. There is certain issues, certain areas that photographs and everything can be taken off, put in the museum, and then we can move on and start fresh. This is how St Helena is at the moment, and it is rather unfortunate. Recently, I have worked closely with the EDIP team, the IT team, to try to establish an extension to the car park at the General Hospital. Hopefully that plan will go through. It will allow for another 14 to 20 car parks in that area. There were 3 other areas that were identified. Again, infrastructure has stopped that development, and also history and everything else that goes with it. People must learn that this is a small island we need to develop. And if you cannot come to terms with how we want to develop the island, then St Helena will always remain the way it is, unfortunately.
Candidate Buckley.
Yeah, just to say, I fully concur with Mr. Giannis just said. Me and him used to be on the same committee. And again, we seem to be treating the symptoms of the problem and not treating the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem is there are too many vehicles being imported to St Helena. And it's great importing vehicles, placing duties on it, and it's great revenue earner for the government. The public is shouting out for the money to go back into the roads. We as elected members need to look above and beyond, thinking strategically, maybe transition to electric vehicles, provide a better public transport system, disincentivize individuals from bringing their vehicles into town with higher parking rates. And it's about changing mindsets. Nobody doesn't want to drag their shopping up and be on the public transport, everybody dragging plastic bags up and down. They want to keep the comfort of their own vehicle. So this is really, it's about education. And the two need to meet together in the middle.
Thank you. Supplementary questions?
Could Lower Jamestown become pedestrianised?
Candidate Young.
Yes, but the infrastructure moving from Jamestown Wharf into Rupert's, that could be considered, because then we will be able to have a seafront that we'll be able to use for entertainment, and the lower part of Jamestown could then become pedestrianised. We have a roundabout in front of the canister that traffic can turn around and go back both ways into Field Road and back up to the main street of Jamestown into Ladder Hill Road for access. So yes, I think that is something that could be looked at, but again, we have to work with everything that we have here on the island at this moment in time and make sure that the processes are right to bring that into force.
Thank you. Candidate Midwinter.
I also believe that it can be pedestrianised. My hometown in Windsor in the UK, before I came to St Helena, was pedestrianised. We had 55,000 population in Windsor, and we did pedestrianise the whole of the middle of the town. But what you then have is you allow buses through certain times, you allow offloading and onloading at certain times of day, usually outside of normal working hours. So with some jiggery pokey with the business community and one-way systems, it can be done. And again, encouraging people that you do not need to park physically in town. You can park outside of town. You could have a shuttle bus service in and out of town. But I think it could be done.
Did you indicate, Candidate Thomas? No? Okay. Any supplementaries? Yes?
This is a question for Mr. Derek Thomas. You mentioned earlier about Bradley's being a good facility for the quarantine. Why is it now not people being quarantined at home instead of at Bradley's?
Yes, the reason being when we first utilised Bradley's, that was the best option. We didn't know much about the pandemic. Things had moved on. People were more, the professionals were more qualified, our plans were backed up, and it was seen as if you quarantine 60, 70 people at Bradley's, and if there's anybody affected by COVID-19, they're in close proximity. The chances is there's a risk that they will catch it. The quarantine at home was seen as a better option, provided the accommodation is suitable, because if you're accommodating in your home one person, or you're accommodating with two people, you're not got the risk of spreading it. The point I made was that we do have an excellent hospital facility should the need arise. But like I say, things will move on. People were more educated, more trained, plans were worked up, and that's why we moved from Bradley's to home quarantine.
Okay, our next question, Hannah.
What are your priorities for education, and in particular for tertiary education?
Candidate Midwinter.
I personally believe that we should be doing far more to encourage students to go overseas. I'm a strong advocate for rotational migration. I think that we should be finding the funding to send as many sixth form students to tertiary education as we can. I would hope, however, with the advent of the cable, that we would be able to do more in relation to those tertiary qualifications here. We've already seen during the COVID period that we have been able to have students do part of their studies in St Helena via distance learning and then go off to university. So I think there's ways that we can look around doing that, but I do think we need to be doing more to encourage students to go forward to university and achieve tertiary education.
Candidate Thomas.
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. Part of my manifesto was to invest in our education system. And I know the education system has improved, and the last set of results have shown that. But I do think more can be done to ensure that the children at the primary level, when they go into secondary, they are at the right level of education. So I think the government need to look at making sure the resources are there. But also it doesn't stop there. I think when the children leave school, there should be a pathway to a job. And the government has invested heavily in the cash now to support that. And I know it comes, looking at the Financial Secretary, it comes with funding. But I do believe that is, if we want to be serious about our youth, then we need to give them all the opportunity with the terms of delivery of education, but also at the end provide a pathway to a job. And at the minute, the apprenticeship scheme is for 1 year, and I know a number of people now out of job, and it doesn't do good in terms of trying to retain our people on Ireland. Furthermore, that we got the students going to the scholarship students. I think that needs to be developed. Is that when they go in a study that is relevant to the needs of St Helena, and there's a proper pathway into a job and properly remunerated. And I know that you have to find the funding for this, but that needs to be a priority. And we will never be able to compete at the minute with places like the Falklands because of the salary they're offering. But we need to be able to address this problem now through our education system. And if we want to be serious about our young people into taking over key jobs, then we need to provide that opportunities. And I think that should be, in my view, a priority. Certainly, if I get elected, it'll be a priority. for the government going forward.
Candidate Bargo?
I would look at it too as not only you got vocational or academic, you got vocational in there as well, that we would want students to strive towards being electricians, plumbers and stuff, because not everyone, are geared to doing academic studies. Also, I think touching on to what a candidate said earlier is why can't we do university degrees here on island so everyone can get a chance at, having the same education. And I think that's what fibre optic is likely to bring for us all. Okay.
Thank you. Candidate Buckley?
Just to say, I wholly agree with Candidate Bargo, and she says not everybody is academically inclined. And I think we fail to identify that in our schools at an early stage and develop them from a young age. We're looking for farmers right now, can't find any. It is a real challenge. But going back to tertiary education, I think we have to approach this with a sense of equity. And when I say that, I mean, what are you as students going to give back for the investment that the government has made in you? And when I say the government, I don't mean me and these councillors. I mean your friends and family and everybody on St Helena who has invested 60, 70,000 pounds for you guys to go away and study to the best of your ability. We come back and then we look at things like bonding. Do we have to bond now you for 5 years? Do we have to tell you to stay for 5 years? Do we have to make you stay? And of course, times and things change. Mindsets change. You want to go. You can buy your way out, as it were. So these are the things that come into the picture when it comes to public accountability. But I think the wider picture for me is the reason why I'm a keen focus on education this year is about how we go about funding our scholarships. And I truly believe that a lot of the bigger organisations on this island needs to throw their hat in the ring. Solomon, Shore, Connect, the Bank of St Helena, some of which contribute already, but to form some sense of equity between the bunch, depending on their financial input into the island, because I really feel we can do more, as we always can, if we get together.
I'm going to allow Candidate Knight.
I agree with a lot of my colleagues here, the candidates. I feel that there is a gap in St Helena for a technical college, because we've got students that don't have academic facilities, and if they can go to a technical college where somebody can assist them with mechanical engineering, electricians, that can also fill a gap, because there are a lot of people that are out of jobs, and the young people specifically, because that opens up another door for them. It broadens their minds for them to explore a higher degree in IT, in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and in that field. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any supplementaries? Brooke first? Yeah?
Candidate Buckley, why do you think there is not a lot of young people fulfilling agricultural positions, as this is a huge skill on the island?
I think it's a sign of the times. I think the world is heading to a digital age, and here on St Helena, our cultural values tend to change over a long period of time. And I always joke and I say St Helena is 20 years behind, because I really believe that. But in the last 5 years since I've been on council, I can sense a change in the air. And not everybody wants to be out in the field no more. But I think it is a part of our lives as human beings. We need to grow our own food, and that is a fact. Not everybody can sit in a desk job and make big money. But you can make just as much money plowing the fields, creating bottled water, coming in with ways and innovations to improve our food security, which is the absolute fundamental thing of any life.
Josh?
Now, there are a lot of us in sixth form, almost 30, and I'd like to know what plans are there to make us the workforce of tomorrow.
Candidate Yon?
Thank you for your question. First of all, I do believe that the Education Department, together with yourselves, should be identifying your next form and step in your education well towards finding employment. That is first and foremost, We cannot continue to send people away from the island and they become IT technicians or technical technicians in software, and we only have one place on the island to fill. We need to be able to give you the opportunity where you can delve into it to find the peace in your mind where you want to start now and what you want to be in the future. When that is done, then the education system here will be able to assist you, because I do believe we have a very good education system here. It's just that it has not been opened up in the right directions to entertain all of you at this moment in time.
Candidate Barger.
I agree with Russell, but also I think for us to make it, we need to have succession plans, like so that jobs are made available to you guys when you're, leaving school. And if you have a university degree or whatever, you would want to be in, a good, prominent position. So we need to go with succession planning as well, so we pave way for the young ones coming in. And that could be that you understudy someone for, 3 to 5 years to get into the very top positions, but we need to start working on that.
Candidate Knipe.
I agree with a lot of my colleagues here. There is another avenue here that I'm pleased to say that Prince Andrew are exploring it, and that is in the agricultural field. When you are on holiday, or because I don't have a child that's at school, so I'm a little bit out of touch, but they go and they work within agriculture. There's also, and I'm glad to say, our marine section is being explored, and that is another field that the young people can get involved in, because it opens up a wide territory with fish farming. It's really it's an exciting field to go in from a marine specific. So thank you.
Candidate Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. I do believe this work to be done, Josh, you're saying there's about 30 or so will be coming out, and this is where the new government need to do some work, because I do know that a lot of people in the private sector, skilled people, they are reluctant to take on apprenticeships because there's no incentive there for them. And that needs to be addressed. That's been around for some time. We've got masons, we've got carpenters, and they're willing to invest and teach young people. But the government really need to get that off the ground and get it off the ground properly. The government need to be looking at how they can create some incentives to encourage the private sector to properly engage and pass their skills on to our young people.
And Candidate Midwinter?
I actually think there's three main parties to this. So the education, skills and employment portfolio clearly has a role to play in this. But I think yourselves and also potential employers have an important role to play. I think employers should be putting themselves out there to you as sixth formers and saying, this is what we have coming up, this is what is likely to be available in the future. But I think you should also be proactive in that. About 2 years ago, I was invited to a coffee evening with a difference by a group of Prince Andrew School sixth formers, which actually they were presenting themselves to us as potential employers. But I think that needs to be happening for yourselves right now.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our final question, final primary question. Amy.
There has been a study or discussion into the possibility of creating a single primary school. So what are your views on this?
Candidate Midwinter.
I'm not actually afraid to say that I'm actually a strong advocate for that. I think if we're looking to build for the future and minimise leakage of resources and revenue, the one thing that we could be doing if we had sufficient capital funding to produce a central primary school is to create a central primary school. It will mean that there is the ability to share resources, buses, teaching staff, and minimise the cost to the island overall.
Candidate Thomas?
Yeah, there certainly would be perhaps huge benefits in creating the one primary school, because obviously I don't really pick what Rob done, because in terms of the resources and everything else, pool and resources, that's got to be of benefit. The issue would be in terms of funding, and we were quite fortunate at St Helena over many years in receiving what was European Union funding, and the last lot was received was for the fibre optic cable. Now, the British government did made a promise that they would replace that type funding, and I think that needs to be followed through by the new government for the overseas territories, and that sort of funding would fund things like a primary school. Let's talk about purpose-built hospital, another hospital, all of those sort of things, because, like I say, over the years, St Helena has benefited tremendously. So that would need to be explored, that funding replacement by the next government.
Thank you. Candidate Barger.
Yes, I can see the benefits of it overall, and it would, save money. So initially it would be money up front, but it could save us a lot of money in the long run. But it also is something that is culturally, an interest in that, the competitiveness with schools now when they're running against each other. And I think that is another thing we have to consider. So again, it's trying to find a balance, which, kind of, take care of everything, really,
Any supplementaries?
You're talking about sharing teaching staff and things, so how would you make sure that all of your fully qualified teachers are maximised to their full potential?
So I do think that then needs to be looked at in the context of class sizes, numbers of teaching staff, the right skill sets within those teaching staff, and the ability to retain and attract the teaching staff that we need. By centralising, hopefully we would have a wider number of teachers available for that central school. But it would really be something that the whole picture would have to be reviewed as to how do we pull that together.
Is there anything further? Jamie?
So money is always an issue. So how would you gather funds for the single primary school?
Again, as I did actually mention in my previous response, that it would be subject to capital funding. That's something that we don't have the funding for at the moment. And again, we would have to look at external sources, the UK government, if that's a possibility. Yeah, I think we'd have to look at what avenues there are for that type of capital funding.
Candidate Barger?
I think always we can do whatever we want, pretty much, in that a good case to the United Kingdom, the government, UK government, as long as we got a very good case. I mean, the initial investment would be huge, but the savings that would be on the island and them in the long run could, far outweigh this.
Is there anything further? Amy?
Based on ongoing behaviours in the primary sector, what are your views on having a pupil referral room and counselling if the one primary school was to go ahead?
Candidate Winter?
I really don't know the answer to that, to be quite honest. I think that would really be a discussion that wouldn't just be about the education portfolio, but would also come into social services as well. So there would have to be some cross-boundary interaction that involves the school, social services, the parents. I really don't know the answer to that because there's too many facets that would come into that.
Candidate Buckley?
Again, it's a case of not treating the symptoms of the problem by looking at the root cause. Why are these pupils behaving the way they are? And I know it's always pointed towards family issues. Straight away they say, but no, it's not always about that. It's about being able to express yourself, get enough physical activity. I'm a huge advocate of redoing Francis playing to its optimal state. And again, it's about providing support if mental health is what is required. We have newly formed mental health team that have been coming on leaps and bounds. And the whole world is only woken up to mental health about 4 years ago. And we need to get to grips because there's no health without mental health. It starts in your mind, and I hope everybody can be happy.
Anything further? So we've reached the end of our third session. And again, if we can have a round of applause for our students here, I think we've done really well. And likewise, if we can have a round of applause for our election candidates. And hopefully in a week from now, they'll be putting their thinking caps on and thinking what I'm going to do next. Well, probably at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning on a Thursday morning. That's the end of our session here tonight. And we'd like to say once again thank you to our sponsors and, of course, our St Helena Chevening alumni. And we're going to hand you over to Tara for a few words.
Thanks, Derek. Yes, it's just to say a big thank you to all of the candidates for giving up their time this evening to come out and take part in this event. As Derek mentioned, this is funded by the Chevening Alumni Program Fund. It's something that the 6 of us put together earlier on in the year, and I think it's been a great opportunity to help the students become familiar with the new ministerial system and actually engage them in local issues that are affecting everybody. So a big thank you to the candidates for giving up their time tonight. Thank you to Derek for facilitating the evening. To Prince Andrew School for allowing us time away from the kids' timetable to be able to have presentations on the ministerial system and develop their questions for the evening. I think we're all very proud of the students, and of course we've seen them shine this evening and present themselves, and we should all be very proud of them. And of course we hope that some of you will be potential candidates for the Chevening Scholarship Program further down the line. But also a final thank you of course as well to Shaw for giving us the opportunity to be able to bring this event into the homes of the people on St Helena and overseas, and I'm sure we all have a better idea of some of the views of our candidates, and I hope this helps us all to make more informed decisions when voting days come. So thank you, everybody.